So I'll go ahead and, on behalf of the council, call the meeting to order. This is a joint session of the Monroe County Board of Commissioners and Monroe County Council. It is November 27th, a Monday, and we are ready to go. We have Councilor Deckard, and Councilor McKim, Councilor Munson, Councilor Iverson, and myself here in the Nat U Hill room, and Councilor Crossley is joining us online. Commissioner Giffens, would you like to?
Yes, I'll call to order this meeting of the Monroe County Board of Commissioners. I will note that I'm present here in the Nat U Hill room and that Commissioner Thomas is joining us virtually.
Okay.
And I would just note that since a quorum of the commissioners are not present in person, they can't vote. But since it's been noticed for a county council meeting as well, we can still have the meeting.
Okay, sounds good. Item 2, after the call to order, is ARPA projects discussion. Should we maybe start by listing the projects that are under consideration for this evening? Or, I mean, because I'm not entirely sure. I've got good guesses, but I just want to make sure I know what we're going to cover.
So that was in an email from Angie Purdy, is that correct?
Sort of. There was, let's see.
You're talking about the spreadsheet that has all the projects in it, yeah.
There was a, yes, there was a spreadsheet that was sent to us from Ms. Purdy.
Do you want me to maybe give you some?
That would be great.
All right. Well, I'm looking at the spreadsheet that was included in the packet on the website, and it appears to me that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different projects that are on the list. And if you pull that off, there would be the highlighted one, and there would be the karst, and I think that's the soccer fields at Karst Farm Park, the jail transition, housing infrastructure, airport stormwater / drainage, broadband, and Centerstone residential.
And then there's one other highlighted item on that spreadsheet. Are we not considering that either? I don't know what it is.
There are 2 of them, right? Housing infrastructure and housing land purchase.
Mm-hmm. Housing land purchase is on there. Is that not something?
I think those 2 are kind of the combined project that we discussed at the executive session, and I can give a update on that when we get there in your discussion.
And they're separated because they would be coming out of different buckets of ARPA money. Is that why?
I'm sorry, I was.
Are they in separate columns on the spreadsheet because they would be drawing from different categories of the ARPA funds?
Well, if you just want to, I can give you the background right now, and I think that would help with we met in the executive session when we looked at several different projects. I think the project that we are exploring at this point involves infrastructure expenditures only, so we don't have the housing purchase as part of that. And so, or the land purchase is part of that. So I think the bulk of what we're looking at is housing infrastructure, housing infrastructure. So we would be primarily pulling from that column. I think we did add a child care component to it that has not been allocated within that, but I would assume it would have fallen in the restricted because the other child care programming that we've done has fallen into that category.
Okay. And are you anticipating that the child care component is, do you have an amount on that?
I don't have a a full amount on anything yet, but I guess the budget we're working with would be up to $1 million for the childcare, and the remainder would go for infrastructure. So it's broken down correctly on your sheet,
Got it.
with the thought that we may move some from one to the other as the project gets developed.
Okay, so that last item then is childcare in conjunction with the housing infrastructure project.
Correct.
Got it. Okay. So if am I driving this or are you? It doesn't, okay, all right,
Madam Chair, may I just suggest that Mr. Cockrell join us at the table since we have
that would be
empty
lovely.
mics?
I'll try not to let it go to my head.
No reason for him to shout across the room.
Especially in this room where the acoustics are so terrible. Yeah.
Yes,
Madam President, I would like to ask if there are any spreadsheets or other documents that can be shown on the screen that we do this. And perhaps Michelle can help us out.
yes, so the two documents that we received today are the one that Mr. Cockrell was just referencing, which would probably be handy to put up.
Yeah,
And then we also received an updated status listing from the auditor's office.
and this is Technicolor one.
It's very colorful, yes.
Okay,
And I'm
so
not
that's the
sure.
one I'm looking for. Is
That came in an email this afternoon from Ms. Purdy.
Thank you.
And I believe that,
Is this the section you're wanting to look at? Can you tell?
Yes.
I think the highlighted areas, I mean, I pulled that off
From
the
Ms.
website
Purdy.
an hour or two ago, so.
Okay. Any other questions or logistical concerns?
Ah, we were meeting then. We were
Yes.
meeting then, that's why I
Well,
haven't seen it.
It may be, because I know we have members who have a hard stop tonight, maybe just a little bit of the background. When we met last time for the Karst Trail, I think everybody was in favor of supportive of going with the full project. It
Not
was,
trail, sorry.
or Karst, sorry, I with the redevelopment, the soccer fields. It says Karst, and then I immediately go to trail in
Yeah,
my
it
mind.
needs a little bit more explanation.
So these are the soccer fields, and if you recall in our GO bond, we put 1.2 million into that. And then this was to cover, when we discussed it at the last meeting, was to cover the remaining balance of that. I think the concern or the thought was, let's ask and see if there was any tourism dollars available for that. And I think Mr. McKim was assigned himself the task of going and making those kind of conversations happen. So I don't know if you want to start there or.
Sure.
Could be good.
Well, indeed, we will be discussing, I hope voting on $500,000 support from the CVC, from the innkeeper's tax at tomorrow's CVC meeting at noon. And yeah, that would bring the balance basically to be able to support the whole project, which includes 2 artificial turf fields and LED lighting, new LED lighting for one of the existing grass fields, and new irrigation, drainage, and retrofit LED lighting for 2 of the other existing grass fields. And Kelly Whitmer is here if anybody has any technical questions about the projects or about the costs.
I have a question that I've asked before, and it's not about the project details at all. It's about the possibility of funding it from food and beverage money. And has that been discussed or considered? I wasn't at the last meeting, but I've asked and haven't really gotten, and I know we haven't seen the plan for food and beverage for next year. So I'm not sure if that's included or not.
The things that we have been talking about in terms of putting together a plan, we're more focused on what would be happening at the property that we bought that we hope will be turned into a quarry land park. That would be an appropriate use for food and beverage tax money because that directly relates to tourism and economic development in that area. So,
Will it be written specifically for that property, or will it be written more broadly so that we have flexibility to use it on other park properties?
I think that for the plan for next year, it's written more specifically for that, but it doesn't exclude other possibilities. Remember that we're to present a plan.
Right, and there's an upcoming deadline.
Yes, of Thursday. So.
And are we going to see this?
I hope so, yeah. It's
Okay.
going through some different iterations of stuff back and forth.
All right.
So.
I realize that's a tangent,
Yeah,
but to me, it's.
But it impacts how this money gets spent.
Yeah.
I understand.
Councilor McKim.
Yeah, and I mean, I certainly, I would support use of food and beverage tax for this, but also for the quarry park. But I guess one of the, my thought in discussions with others about that amount, the amount that comes out of a tourist-related tax kind of reflects the fact that there is definitely a tourist impact here, but the bulk of this project is going to benefit local Monroe County residents. It's there definitely will be new dollars being brought.
I see.
There'll be people staying at hotels, but it isn't primarily. It isn't like the convention center, which is mostly a tourism-related facility. This is mostly our kids who are going to be playing, but it will certainly be bringing in tournaments and some additional dollars. So I felt like this balance reflects, or this funding plan reflects the kind of balance between local usage and tourism.
Okay. Councilor Munson and then Councilor Iverson.
So when I was considering this, and I know the upcoming deadline is very soon, I thought the council would be getting some input on this, and maybe we'll have it tomorrow before our meeting. But I was thinking it would be useful also to include trails as another possibility, because our trails are used by people coming from outside the county. And we do have funding needs for trails. And I'm not saying it's a specific request, but just to include it so that if an opportunity presents itself where we would need local matching funds, for example, that we could look to food and beverage as a way to support that.
Well, and food and beverage is ongoing in terms of income from that as well. So that doesn't exclude it from this.
Okay.
Part of it was that also that a grant application had been put together several years ago for supporting the quarry land at the park for the work that was, and so we were able just to build on what Commissioner Thomas had written several years ago to flesh that out.
And I would just point out that I've seen draft versions of the plan, and it certainly does not expend all the food and beverage money that we have, right? So it's what are we going to do the next year or so to kind of, and it is focused mostly on the quarry area that was purchased. So I think the plan will evolve with time, and so, it can always, we have to refile it every year, so it's kind of a 1 year look at what we're going to do.
Commissioner Thomas has her hand up.
Yeah, Councilor Iverson.
Yeah,
Okay.
I just wanted to note that this is just for 2024 and other things can be added later. I don't think it is a document that evolves over time. It is not set in stone.
Okay.
This is Marty. Who am I supposed to be addressing my comment to? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I would like to suggest, and I have discussed this with a couple of people, that we make our list with the food and beverage pretty broad, so that we can mention like 3 or 4 things and say that it's to be spent on. You don't have to say exact dollar amount for any of the 3 or 4 things, because we're going to be held to account to actually move forward with spending these dollars, and we need to make that broad enough so that we get support. Let's say if you said that we plan to spend on any one of the following 4 things. I just said 4, but whatever. One of the things could be in supporting our trail system. The other could be in supporting the soccer fields. The other could be in supporting, whatever we might want to say, but we shouldn't lock ourselves into just one thing.
It makes sense.
Because we should get something that all of us could support. And you don't have to say 4, let's say 3 things that would also support tourism. But that's what I suggested. I think we have to make sure that we are spending this money, and now I'm talking about the food and beverage money, in ways that the public will support as well.
Thank you. Councilor Iverson.
Thank you, Madam President. On the spreadsheet that we were just looking at, there's a very helpful budget at the very bottom. It's rows 48 through 55. And Michelle, I was wondering if you could project that. That visualization helps me understand a little bit better the breakdown of the projects that are happening at Karst Park. Michelle, are you able to?
Where do you want me to go?
If you scroll, we're in columns B through F on lines 48 through 55. There it is. So that outlines some of the expenditures in the first 2 columns and some of the revenue in the next 2 columns. And I think that's a helpful budget for folks to see as we're talking about this, to bring it back to ARPA.
Yes. Sounds good. Are there any other ARPA-related questions or comments regarding the Karst soccer fields projects?
No.
All right. So, in general, I know I support this funding, and while I would like to see food and beverage funds used more expansively and include the soccer fields, it does seem like an appropriate use for ARPA as well. Yes.
I hate to get back to food and beverage, but just to address that specific comment that you just made. And I sent out the diagram earlier today that had kind of the relevant pieces outlined on the map of the parks. There are also 2 additional soccer fields that are not in good shape and not going to be addressed by this proposal at all. But the idea is they're kind of held in reserve if and when the council and commissioners have additional funding sources that they might want to put towards that. So if we're in a position where we want to put food and beverage tax, there's still 2 soccer fields that we can put turf on. So.
Well, to that point, that would be great if we had a flexible food and beverage plan to kind of just keep that as an option.
And I wanted to apologize that I've had family that they didn't arrive for Thanksgiving until Saturday and just left today. So I haven't looked at any of the information for tonight. So if it looks as though I'm not prepared, that's because I'm not. I just wanted to make sure that we covered.
Well, you are in great company because we received information today. So
Yes.
no worries.
No worries. We're just now getting it.
Councilor McKenna.
Well, so I guess in the past, essentially in this meeting, we've had the commissioners and council consents on what we want to do. Then the council will go ahead and appropriate, and the commissioners will add it to the ARPA plan. And in this case, there's the additional step of me taking this to the CBC. So are we in consensus? Is anyone opposed to moving forward with this plan?
No.
With the plan for the Karst parks or for the whole, everything that was talked? Okay.
The car, yeah, sorry, just the cars, yeah.
Well, and I was just going to add, if I may, Madam President, I think there's been a long time consensus on karst and energy to move forward. So I think the consensus I hear, unless someone's hiding their opinion, is to move forward on that. And I appreciate you taking that to CBC to get support there for quick dispatch of this. And that's getting things done. And so for me, that, yes, let's move forward.
Great. Okay. The next item on the list is the jail transition. And it looks as though we have $300,000 for that. Is there more information or any information that you can share with us before I
Well,
jump in?
I assume I can. I'm kind of, I don't know what you know kind of a thing. So I know Molly Turner King in our office has been working with the Sheriff's Department and working with, and getting information from our consultant at DLZ to kind of formulate a draft agreement for kind of the scope of work of what this position is expected to do. My understanding is if it's not there, it's real close to being mutually agreed to. And so in my mind, it's this appropriation is for, that agreement would be a $100,000 a year agreement. This would be for 3 years, which would begin, probably right now, it would begin January 1, run for 3 years and be expended by the end of 2026. So it would be obligated. One of the details that I think I can't report a sure thing on is this the right structure for that, so that if we have to change a vendor in 2025, we can still utilize ARPA funds or those kind of things. So we want to look at that risk and try to minimize it as much as we can. That, we want to make sure that if we allocate $300,000 of ARPA, that for 3 years, that we can use it $300,000 of ARPA for 3 years. So we're trying to get a hold of Baker Tilly to make sure that we're structuring it correctly. So there may be some structural things that we would change if this is the route everybody wants to go. It's always helpful to know that this is the route everybody wants to go before we get too far into a lot of these weeds. But we're pretty close, and we pretty much went pretty far in the weeds anyway, because I think the people who went through the pony training have recognized, and my conversations with our representative from DLZ recognize that the jail transition position is an important one and is going to be critical moving forward to making sure that whatever facility we get has the appropriate input from the Sheriff's Department, and that they're organized in how to handle the questions.
Great. Counselor Iverson.
Yeah, so I'm looking at the contract that we received on the 14th of November. It sounds like work is still being done on it. But, I was at the pony training with Councilmember Munson and with Commissioner, multiple commissioners. And, I think this is the way to go. I think we're certainly on the right path here in terms of a contract for a director. So I'd like to see this continue to move forward and if possible, taking action as soon as possible.
All right. Any other questions or concerns on using $300,000 of ARPA for the jail transition director position contract?
I support it.
I support it.
The big issue was if, as Mr. Cockrell said, if somehow the first person that signed on to the contract decides to leave mid-contract before the end of the 3 years, we need to make sure that we somehow have that money obligated so that it would then be available for another contract. If we sign it just with one person and they leave, then do we lose that money?
Right.
So we're trying to, that's part of the problem. We need to make sure that that actually obligates the money for the position. So trying to figure that out.
So the details of the actual contract are very important too.
Yeah, the structure is,
protect it.
something we're going to
Of
want to make
course.
sure we run by our consultants to make sure it fits
Yeah.
our needs.
Would we still be able to appropriate tomorrow night? Or do we need these details?
No.
I think you could appropriate, and I actually think you need to appropriate before we sign any contracts.
Oh, good.
Okay.
Well, and I wanted to kind of pick up on that thought. While I do think that the details of the contract have an importance, I think the sentiment of the elected officials, particularly on the council level, is that they, from our last meeting, support the notion of that transition director. We've talked about it. Sheriff and Chief Deputy have been here, and I think that we can move with dispatch on that. And that contract, that's for other parties to figure that out and determine. We certainly can't do that in here.
I did hear this afternoon from Ms. Turner King that the 300,000 covered the salary requirements for the contract, but that there was some concern that there was liability insurance that might be associated with that position that might cost a little bit more. She anticipated that it would be less than $10,000 a year. So we could appropriate 330 just to make sure that we've got that covered.
Good idea. I support that.
Councilmember Crossley has her hand raised.
Oh, I'm sorry, Councilman Crossley.
Thank you. I think Commissioner Githens kind of said something, because I guess I support it. It sounds like the council supports it also as well. I guess I just wanted to hear, like, what were the major concerns that maybe some of the commissioners had in terms of the use of the funds for this. My other question would be that if it is a concern of if a person leaves midway through the contract, and it sounds like this is something that we have to go through Baker and Tilly to get a thumbs up or thumbs down for, how soon could we reach out to Baker and Tilly, and I guess how soon could we reach out? Because it sounds like we all want to move expeditiously on this. And so I guess I would just like to know, like, if this is what we will do, how soon could we hear from Baker and Tilly, or reach out to Baker and Tilly on this?
Well, we've reached out. It's just a matter of scheduling the meeting. So that hasn't been scheduled yet. My anticipation is generally working with them. It doesn't take a whole lot of time to get that scheduled. So I would guess that we would have the answer by the end of the week, whether the current path works, and if it doesn't work, what path we should take. I don't think this would be a lengthy time frame between where we are now to figuring out where we are is the proper way or not.
And the first part of her question, I believe, was what were the concerns that the commissioners had? Was that correct?
Correct. I heard a little bit, but I guess I personally would like to know, because I was under the impression that we were all on the same page, but maybe that's just me, and that's my assumptions, and sorry for making those assumptions. But I guess if there are concerns, and we already have the timeline on when we have to, like, spin down ARPA and have these plans, what are those concerns so that we can air this stuff out and so that we can get moving?
Commissioner Thomas, do you have a response?
Yeah, I'm a little unsure why we're having, I'm really kind of floored right now. So here's the thing. My concern is that, having sat through the pony training and having had a discussion with DLZ, typically what happens now, I support funding the transition, although council's going to have to find a way to fund it into the future beyond ARPA. So it's a stopgap, and I think everybody knows that, so I'm cool with that. But I don't think the structure's correct, because when we were in the pony training and what we've heard from other facilities, what we heard from DLC is that typically it is somebody within the system who becomes the transition director, not somebody from outside, and then somebody is brought in, and that transition is only part-time at first, and then it becomes full-time, and that somebody is, then you're going to have to hire additional people, and I'm fine with using ARPA for that to support the transition. Then you hire additional people to do the work of the people from the current facility who are now spending more and more time on transition. So we do have to hire people, we do have to fill in the gap, but I am completely unaware of why an outside person would be used for this when I've not seen that done elsewhere.
Well, at the last meeting we had on the topic, it was pretty clear that it was because the sheriff and his staff would like it to be that way and feel that's appropriate. So, yes.
Well, and we also heard from in the pony training that there are certain aspects of the way that we are building a facility or a series of facilities that needs to be catered to what the local situation is. And I know certainly as we've had ongoing conversations with the folks that have put on the pony training, they've certainly, brought that back up that, we do need to be putting our systems into place in that it fits with our what our law enforcement is looking at, as well as the other people that are going to be in this facility are. So I certainly think that this is the way to move forward. I think, I want to be really clear that as we're making steps to go forward, that this is our will. We would like to have this contracted director position.
Yeah. Any other comments on?
Yes.
Yes.
Just to let you know, part of what the sheriff was saying at the last meeting, might have been the chief deputy, might have been Parker, was saying that while they have staff on duty, in other words, they've got the jail commander and the assistant jail commander who could do this if they were working as the jail commander, but they have a full-time, very, very pressured job, and the sheriff is not willing to take them off of that job and not operate the jail in the way that he feels like it needs to be operated. So he really does not have the staff that he feels like he can give up to do this position. If you remember, I believe that's pretty much what he said.
Yes, thank you. And Councilor McKay.
Yeah, just I would encourage anybody to go back to the last council meeting and watch that debate happened. I feel like we've already had this debate, and it occurred, it got pretty close to the beginning of the meeting, so it shouldn't be too hard to find. I support moving ahead with an appropriation.
Should we appropriate 330 to cover the insurance?
That seems like a reasonable,
Okay.
I'm okay with it.
Does
I
anybody
agree.
object to that?
No.
I think it's needed.
Great.
One thing that I would like to share with Councilor Crossley, since she raised this, when I looked at the contract that was being proposed, I saw job duties. I didn't see anything about the experience or education that would be expected for the person that is hired in. And we usually have that in all of our job descriptions. And so I feel like there's a piece missing also for that.
Do we usually include that in contracts?
Yeah,
We do not put it in the contract.
yeah.
Do not?
Do not. Typically, that's part of the vetting process that we go through when we choose the vendor, is we look at their background, we look at their experience, so we know that prior to hiring.
So in other words, they propose the background of their participants, and then you rate them on, or
You make that decision based upon, it's not dissimilar to a hiring process where you ask people for, hey, are you interested in this contract? And then you find interested people and you vet them and you get the best choice you can make. So, but it typically that stuff is not in the contract because you already know it.
Right. To personal service.
But you also know what you expect as background and education, and I don't at this point.
So, to be clear, though, the contract, we appropriate, the contract is signed by the sheriff, and it's not approved directly by the commissioners. However, since it's ARPA funded, this will have to go into your plan for the funds before the sheriff can enact any contract. Is that correct? Got it. Okay. I think we're ready to move to the next item. Just moving along the spreadsheet, the next one is the housing infrastructure item for $2.5 million, affiliated with what we should change from housing land purchased to housing affiliated childcare or something like that for another 1 million.
Yes. And I don't think I need an appropriation for that full amount at this point in time. I think we need to do a lot more work. But part of that work would need us to hire some design professional to look at the land and do a site plan. I am meeting with some people, I believe next week, to kind of look at an existing structure on the site to see how it needs to, whether one, it fits any kind of childcare. Again, I'm not an expert in this, but the person I'm talking to knows levels and you know all the details. So we're going to go on a site visit to look at the site with that, to see what would need to be done to that structure, if anything, to make it whatever the level
suitable for childcare.
Correct. And so really, I don't have a number right now, but I expect to have a number before the council meeting tomorrow night. I expect it to be less than 200,000 for that kind of site plan, site design work. But that's kind of the update on that project right now.
Okay, so we can, are there questions on the project?
Okay, so this would be out of the box that was labeled housing infrastructure. We've now labeled childcare with housing or something like childcare affiliated.
No, actually, the housing infrastructure is the same one. What we are changing is housing land purchase to the.
Sorry, that's what I meant. I know I said something different.
Right.
But
Which is
that
just
is-
off the screen on the
that is what I
display
meant. Okay,
to
thank
the
you.
right.
Yeah.
I know I didn't say that. Okay.
So this would be out of the housing infrastructure box, because this would be doing the site plan to design the infrastructure for the site.
But in terms of the 3-day, the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday drill, it sounds like you need 200,000. Or should we just go ahead and?
I should know the number before your meeting tomorrow. I'm just kind of giving you kind of what I think to be a high-end estimate, so it doesn't shock you tomorrow when I give you a more firm number.
Okay.
So what you're getting tomorrow is the cost estimate for land suitability or structure.
To do the surveying and the site work necessary to be able to present a plan to the plan commission and the planning staff, so that they can look at it. And I need to talk to the planning staff after I talk to them to make sure I'm trying to keep them in the loop as much as I possibly can to make sure we're all on the same page.
So I didn't think it was till the following week that we were checking out the structure, per se.
It is the following week that we're doing that.
I support it.
But that will not be done before any meetings.
Jeff and I had the same question. I support this.
Okay.
And I'm encouraged to hear we're going to have the number for our meeting.
Any other questions or comments?
Are the commissioners good with?
I support it. Yeah.
Checking, all right. I support this as well. The fact that this site has the potential for childcare to be included is super exciting.
Yeah.
Absolutely love it. So we'll consensuses we concede? How does that, what is like, anyway, we agree that.
We have reached consensus.
That's not the right.
We have reached consensus, Kate.
Right. We have achieved some level of consensus that on our next agenda, we'll have an updated amount, but it'll be just for the design planning component of the project.
Correct.
Okay. Sounds good. Before I mess up any more vocabulary, let's move to airport, stormwater, and drainage.
Yes, and I think that you guys should have received two different things on this. The first was a contract with the airport's design consultant to do a pretty broad review of the stormwater and the drainage issues that they're seeing out there. I think a lot of people at this table actually toured the facility. I toured it as well and noted that there are considerable problems. The cost of that was $568,600, but that did not include a karst and sinkhole evaluation. I talked with Carlos today, and he reached out to the vendor. They do not believe that component would be more than $50,000, and probably less depending on if they were allowed to do dye testing or what kind of technology they could use as part of the drainage process. They're working with planning to kind of figure out those kind of issues. The other was emailed out. I received it from Carlos today. It was a additional 101,800. Oh, here it is. $101,800 estimate, and this is to repair a portion of the taxiway that has, when we were, those of us who were on the tour, we noticed the dip in the runway. I would think it is stable for the winter, but feel that, and talking to Carlos, he feels that, if we had a large rain in the spring, that could destabilize it. And so this work would to excavate the issued area, and instead of putting dirt back, they would just put concrete back from the pipe to the taxiway, and then it would also repair the rest of that. Now this work was included in the original estimate for the total of the drainage, so this is essentially, the study is going to study a much broader area. This is to kind of just fix one emergency area that would be included in that broader study. But they feel there's an incredible danger, or there's a potential for an incredible danger come spring if there's a big rain.
All right, thank you. Councilor McKim?
So I'm sorry, I missed what the number was for the karst study that you estimated.
They said it would not exceed $50,000.
50,000?
50.
Okay, so that would bring the total to about $720,000. Is that, do you see the same?
Yes.
So this would be another case of not appropriating the full amount on here because we're just going to look at the karst survey and the immediate repair
Correct.
portion. Got it.
And the study.
No, wait.
The study, which is the 568 plus potentially 50,000, plus the 102,000 for the repair of the one emergency area.
I'm not getting it.
Okay, so what is the 4 million?
That would be when the study comes back, which we would expect it to come back in February or March. It will highlight all the areas that need it and have a price tag associated with it. Mm-hmm. And I think the consultant's on the call, I believe, and he can correct me if I'm wrong, but it also would probably prioritize them as opposed to where the greatest harm, if we don't repair it, would be.
Okay.
Councilor Iverson?
And I do see the contractor has their hand raised, but I want to make a quick point, or 2 quick points. I support this, and when we were out there, I want to put this in context for folks, is that we need our staff to mow certain areas around the airport. The staff that's mowing in some of these areas, it is so potentially dangerous that they can't go towards certain areas because these sinkholes are just there, and that really drove this home in terms of the context of why this is so important. The other part for me is timing. As we were sitting there thinking about this broader $4.7 million, is that we do need this study to go forward pretty quickly in order to ensure that we're tackling this, and we can tackle this with ARPA funding.
Yep. Councilor Munson?
So what I would like to see is an enumeration of those particular to-dos and their associated costs. And if you would just relay them in order to Michelle, she could put them in below the airport stormwater drainage line, just so that we could all see them. I mean, this is
Somewhat similar to the table on the Karst Farm project. Just
Exactly.
something that,
Is this what you're referring to,
Is
what the study would show?
is that
I don't know what
is
that
that
is.
all the information?
Well,
Okay.
You've sent us several documents, one that has a total of 568, one
It's,
that has a total of
it's a little
35,000,
confusing.
and one that has a total of
Okay.
70,000.
Here is
So-
the initial proposal.
Okay. And this was emailed to us?
That was emailed to you
Wow.
prior to Thanksgiving week?
But by Carlos.
It was sent by Mr. Cockrell on 11/14 at 4:05 p.m.
We'll get that, because I read the part of it, but I didn't get the whole thing.
And then the remaining part was sent out today.
with that immediate repairs.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
But if you have any questions for the contractor, he's on the screen.
Do we have any questions for the contractor?
I don't have specific questions.
And so the idea is you would recommend that we appropriate approximately $720,000 tomorrow.
Yeah, I would have.
Tomorrow, okay.
I would think that we really need to get that study done, and I will say I was a little skeptical until I went on the tour. But the tour really was eye-opening and really showed a lot of
Okay.
problems. And I think one of the problems it showed was the dip in the taxiway. And, I'm not surprised that that has risen to the level of a potential emergency.
Right.
Commissioner Thomas?
Yeah, I just want to say that I support this, and I just want to note for the contractor that the Stormwater Board had already approved and contracted with Christopher Burke to complete an overall drainage study of that area, and I hope that they refer to that document as they do their work. I think it'll be helpful for them. Thank you.
Yes, we have that document, and we've used it briefly, and we intend to use it more. So yes.
Fantastic. Councilor Iverson, you
Yeah,
have something?
and Mr. Kolkowski, I think, one of the design elements is that this is a very comprehensive design. It's not just inventory of stormwater, but it's also karst and sinkholes, and it's that watershed modeling.
Yeah, I didn't know if you wanted me to get into detail on that. I can, but it sounds like just let me know. But yes, it's pretty in depth with what we're doing. The priority is to make sure that the infrastructure at the airport is fixed to a usable and safe level, and then additional requests will be added to the project if funding is allowed. And so we'll bid the bid this project for construction appropriately so that we can have usable units of work that fit against that, dollar value that we show in the chart.
I feel like that was the perfect amount of detail.
Councilor Munson.
So again, I will request that we have a table prepared for our presentation tomorrow so that we can see exactly the various items that are going to be put before us and the public. And so we can say, yes, we are in support of taking care of the necessary studies and the necessary repairs.
That would be
And
great.
I'm terribly concerned when I heard about the mowing, and I hadn't heard about this before, but that's frightening.
Yeah, I was on the tour that Mr. Cockrell spoke about, and Mr. Kowalkowski was also there, as were lots of folks in Commissioner Githens. And it's notable. It's a large scale issue. It's affecting a significant area across the property. Not the least of which is the runway area, although I'm not sure if it's the runway. Is it the runway or the?
It's a taxiway.
Taxiway, that's what it is. The place where the planes drive, which is important. So yeah, it's, I too was a little skeptical until I went out there and saw it for myself. So I'm glad that I did.
I think also when we look at some of the economic development that we all have been looking at, it probably, part of that will be driven by the need for a usable airport. And as we look at the tech corridor that's being talked about along through here, Crane uses our airport for a lot of its flights. And so we need to keep those kinds of things in mind too.
Councilor Devitt.
I was just going to add to it. This is going to, when we look at the total price tag on this and the potential, this is going to be one of the very few times that we actually have dollars around that could do anything about anything like this. In any other time, most communities, including Monroe County, would be out on the limb on this. The other thing I want to say is Commissioner Githens said from an economic development perspective, I want to congratulate the airport's due diligence in being just on top of that. Our beloved BDC director is in here, and I've noticed generally wherever she is, Carlos is not too far away. And I think that's a remarkable thing that both of them are targeting these things and having that conversation. And I hear now about the airport all the time. And for our part, this seems like money now that we can do something about this, which again would not be able or possible in most other times.
Right.
Well said. Other comments? All right, so approximately 720,000 to be appropriated tomorrow. Any opposition on that concept, generally speaking? Okay. Then we have another agenda item for tomorrow. Thank you, Mr. Kowalkowski, for being here.
Yeah, thank you. And I agree with you. Carlos is he's been everywhere and good advocate for the airport. So I think he's on the call. I know he'd say thank you. So
Yeah. The next item, just going through, is broadband at a 100,000. Is that on the
And
table as well?
I will express ignorance on what this 100,000 for broadband is for. I think Mr. McKim was looking at.
Yeah, I don't think we have anything more specific. I think the idea was to allocate some amount to hold in reserve for use in essentially leveraging and obtaining state and federal money. I don't think we have any more details right now. So hopefully we can still leave it yellow, still leave it in the mix for discussion.
Totally.
Okay. So not a specific appropriation for tomorrow, but on our radar. Okay. And then that brings us to the last item that's highlighted, which is Centerstone Residential.
And I have an update on that and hope we can also still leave that in the mix, but not immediately appropriate. So initially, the Centerstone request was for 2 residential supportive housing projects, essentially refurbishing or replacing 2 crumbling projects. One was Blair House, and the request was $267,000, and the other was Fairview Apartments, which was $300,000, for a total of $567,000. Now somehow that got reduced on the spreadsheet to $400,000, but in the meantime, the DMHA actually has came up with full funding for Blair House.
Oh, that's great.
So it was really quite a surprise. So we can actually take that off the list, and which leaves us just with Fairview Apartments at $300,000. But there's still some details that we need to know. There's some complexities because it's in the Hopewell area, and the question is the city going to try to buy it? And if so, for how much? So there's some. I'm suggesting let's leave $300,000 in there in yellow for continued discussion, if that's okay with everybody.
Another continued one.
But that was really exciting that Blair House was fully funded by by
Yeah,
the
that's
state.
really good news.
Terrific. So again, not a specific appropriation at this time.
Yeah.
That is all that has been highlighted on the sheet that we received from the commissioner's office. So are there other items? Yes.
Madam President, I'll start this off, and Commissioner Thomas may want to jump in on this as well, but I just want to, for purposes of mentioning it, I know that council has this as an item of discussion tomorrow, if I've got the agenda correct. But beginning, as most of you know, we've had continued conversations throughout the year, beginning January 1st, 2024, transit service, availability service within heavily populated areas of our community outside the city of Bloomington and within Ellettsville and other locations will expire due to some changes that Chris Myers has been talking to us about. We have been working offline with folks. In fact, I'll be over with Commissioner Thomas in the town of Ellettsville tonight, talking with their town board. But essentially, to guarantee service for the citizens of Monroe County on January 1st, 2024, via an option such as rural transit, this council, the commissioners will have to consider potentially ARPA dollars or other dollars. And let me give you just an estimate on these costs as we've received from rural transit alone. And again, Commissioner, if I have these wrong, please jump in here. But essentially, the total cost would be $220,000 a year to guarantee services in these heavily populated areas. That would come down to, I may have that wrong here on my numbers, pardon me, about $88,000 for the county and $132,000 for the town of Ellettsville to ensure that service continues from this year on into the next year. Commissioner Thomas, am I saying all that correctly? Have I said that?
No, you are correct. This is a lower estimate, having rural transit create a second transit agency, in essence, apart from rural transit, because it's separate funding. And the idea is that it's less than Bloomington Transit quoted in a preliminary conversation of what they would charge to provide the service. So this is less expensive, but we believe the county share will be about $88,000. It will be billed monthly based on actual ridership. For residents, it's going to be seamless. They'll call the same number. They'll have the same door-to-door service as they already have with rural transit, and we think that that is a real benefit because what the city offered involved using Uber, Lyft, and some other things, and it's not quite the same. So, and it would have been more expensive. So we're hopeful that the town council will support this tonight. I know that both the county council and the town council have concerns because the budget's been set for next year and this hasn't been included in it. So I just wanted to highlight all of those things and thank you, Councilor Deckard. See you in a bit.
I apologize. I have to head to another meeting, but this is great. I appreciate hearing that update, and I look forward to hearing more tomorrow.
Sure.
Thanks.
One thing I'll say, just to add to what the commissioner said, if the two, and I want to stress this because it is a stressor, if neither bodies, county or the town or some miraculous third party, which I can't imagine who that is, if they do nothing, the transition to January 1st will not be seamless. Essentially, we'd have a lot of folks needing services who would not have services. Obviously, that is unthinkable. So I throw that out there because it's November 27th. But anyway, that's the work on it.
Councillor Hawk and then Councillor Munson.
Yes, I was wondering, does this assist with the need from Stone Belt? Will that, or will that be a part of this or not?
Stone Belt contract.
You mean in terms of the contract that Stone Belt has for
Yeah, they
transportation with
contract
rural?
directly. Yes.
Right. Yes, I thought they were concerned that rural transit would not be able to help them as they have in the past.
I've not heard anything that puts that service in question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that may, I've not heard on that, but we can certainly follow up with Stone Belt just to check in with them as well.
Well, Councillor Munson and then Councillor Iverson.
So funding to, for a stopgap measure, I think is what we're talking about. Are you thinking of ARPA funding from the county and ARPA funding from Ellettsville?
I think Ellettsville would have to determine that on their end.
Well, of course.
But I think on our end, ARPA should probably be in the consideration, particularly as it is an effort to make this whole for this time until we get on to the next potential solution.
So we will have another meeting December,
12th.
12th.
Yes.
And we would have time to do that appropriation then so that by the first of the year, there's no disconnect.
Yes. What I would say is we probably, and Commissioner, jump in if I've got it wrong, we probably need to send pretty strong indicators to rural transit to maintain that this is seamless.
Yeah.
Similarly, I think the town will face that issue as well. And certainly that's what I would stress to them as well.
Right. Okay.
If I have that right, yeah.
So are we going to talk about this tomorrow night?
We have, but I think it's a discussion item.
Good.
Yeah.
So let's get it out there to the public and.
Yeah.
Councillor Iverson.
And in fact, that's the point I wanted to make, is that there is a ton of information in tomorrow's packet. Thank you to council staff for doing that, including a map of that urbanized area, which I think highlights Mr. Deckard's point precisely. There's a lot of area that's not in that urbanized section. There's going to be a lot of need. And so talking about this early, I think, is so important. And I really appreciate you bringing this to us tonight.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So an alternative is to get consensus on at least 1 year, perhaps, funding. Obviously, ARPA has 3 years that we could do, it seems, calendar-wise. And that would amount to $264,000. That is getting really close to the end of our ARPA lives, which is fine. So I'm not sure without a little bit more accounting
Sure.
about doing something like that, but I would certainly be in favor of, committing to appropriating the first year pending, let's look and see where we can get the money for the next bit, if others were interested in that. Thoughts?
If I might, there's been a lot of discussion at Bloomington Transit about this, and so I don't know that it's going to be more than a year needed. We just don't know, and I assume it's going to have to come out of lost revenue as well. I just wanted to point that out.
Okay. Scooching over to lost revenue. So I don't have that ability to make that calculation to see if we have what we have on the spot here in terms of availability and lost revenue, but I'm interested to know if there is a consensus for, looking at the wrong document perhaps.
According to our auditor's office, we still have over 5 million.
Right, but this is before tonight where we've done some appropriations, so I just
Right,
didn't want
but
to
we
sit
still
here.
have plenty, I think.
Well,
is what-
if you had this sheet,
I don't know what that is.
this is the sheet that we were looking at earlier with the highlights. It indicated that, and I think we added a little bit to the jail transition, but the balance remaining of the 10 million before we did that was over 1.6 million of lost revenue available.
Well, if 1 year is 88,
Yeah.
But
I
that
just,
does not mean that there's 1.6 million of ARPA money that hasn't been allocated. That just means of the lost revenue we've used, there's 1.6. I think,
I guess I need a little bit, we don't have to hash this out right this minute. Just because I don't want to get it wrong. Yeah.
And there are a lot of numbers in the packet too, and a lot of different assumptions and calculations. So
Yeah.
having a precise number and knowing exactly where that number comes from and knowing this is 1 year, that would be very helpful as well.
So you're going to meeting tonight, and
Yes.
maybe between now and tomorrow evening, we'll come up with a number that seems suitable to kick this through the 2024
yes.
and make it happen on our end.
Okay,
So
good deal.
I see lots of nods. I'm seeing some
Yes.
consensus-y looking
Consensus-y looking
things.
faces.
So I'm going to go ahead and ask that that be on the list as well for tomorrow.
Okay.
Any other items? 1, 2, 3, 4. We have 4 people. Got it. If you're leaving, sir, which is perfectly fine, we lose quorum and we will be saying good night.
I will remain.
No. Are there any other comments or questions?
I have nothing further.
Okay. In that case, let's go ahead and adjourn. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.